What is your hope? If they could all in unison say one thing about the influence you've had on their life, what would that be?
That I made them think differently.
Mm-hmm.
I would add to that somebody cared about how they experience things.
Matt Woolley Podcast.
Our guest today is Richard Lawrence. I'm going to call you Rich for short because that's what I know you for.
Yeah.
Thank you for being here.
Good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so as we always do here at the Matt Woolley Podcast, we have to let people know who is Rich Lawrence. So Rich Lawrence is a husband and father. He's business development of Norfolk Southern. He's been an area manager at ConAgra Foods, a group vice president at Crossmark, a senior director of sales at Adele Labs, vice president at Helen of Troy. You've also had several positions at the University of Arkansas Sam Walton College of Business and are currently serving as adjunct professor of leadership, while simultaneously you're the chief commercial officer for Stat Recovery Services.
Yes.
Did I miss anything?
No, I need to take you wherever I go for my introduction. You just kind of blew my mind that you had that, so thank you.
Hey, you're welcome. Okay, so let's get into it. Where did Rich grow up? What's Rich's history?
I grew up on a farm, beef and dairy farm in northern Indiana. I was the youngest of 9 children. Great pleasure. Growing up in a large family, you get to see a lot.
How many kids?
9.
Whoa.
Yeah, I was the youngest of 9. My dad,
A true farm family.
yeah, it was. It was.
Okay.
Everybody worked on there. My dad passed away from his war wounds when I was 4. So I had an incredible mom. She pulled us all together, really focused on giving us lessons. And I took that for granted as a kid. I thought every parent gave their kids lessons, but the one thing they don't, sadly. When my dad passed away, my mom was looking at 9 kids, a farm. But she pulled us all together and she said, you know what? Everybody's got a sad story. This one's yours.
Wow.
But tomorrow, cow's got to be milked. She took all that on herself. And as a kid, you don't realize, until you have your own kids, at least I didn't, the impact that had. I had no idea how she was able to pull herself together in that moment, deliver that message. She milked all the cows that day, and let us all have a day. But I just thought that's what adults did. And, yeah, you don't realize that until...
Wow, talk about setting the bar for perseverance.
Yeah.
You don't have any excuses.
Yeah, that was her
Yeah.
That was her lesson.
Yeah.
Be resilient.
Yeah.
This is... Nobody gets a card for pity, that
Yeah.
type of stuff. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I would tell you that's my childhood in a
nutshell. So how did, so I know several farmers, especially being from southern Arkansas myself, and I know that it's the same no matter where you go, whether you're from Indiana, from Dumas or wherever in the United States, it's farm life is tough.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work and it's a lot of long days. How did that shape you?
Yeah, it's, again, I don't take it for granted. When I was a kid, I would have friends that were doing other stuff, but we were all, you have dairy cows, you're stuck to it. Mm-hmm. There's no vacation because nobody's going to come out and milk your dairy herd. Mm-hmm. So it's like the hard work ethic is built in you. Mm-hmm. My natural alarm clock goes off at 3:30, 4 o'clock a.m. every day.
Still to this day?
Still to this day.
Mm-hmm.
And so over time, you use that time, right? So from 4 to 6 a.m., I can read or do something for myself in that time. But
let's stop right there.
Yeah.
Well, so what does Rich do when he wakes up at 3:30 in the morning?
I'll read. I'll fix some coffee. I'll read. In the summer, I go for a walk. I try to walk. One of the guys I work with, we joke about it because I used to run. I can't. My lower back won't take that. But I'll try to walk 10 miles. Usually takes me about 2 hours and 10 minutes to do that. But the weather's good, and we live in the South, so it's good. And now you got to do it before it gets hot.
Right.
And then I always read a little bit. Just
what do you do in those 2 hours? What's going on in your head?
Yeah. I'm just trying to take it in. We were talking earlier just how I didn't always do that. Right,
Mm-hmm.
I would early in my career, I would get up. I'd be the guy that would get everybody's inbox filled
Mm-hmm.
by that time, just to use that time. Then
Mm-hmm.
I'd say after age 50,
Mm-hmm.
I started to make sure that time was for me, something to develop,
Mm-hmm.
read a book, just take in kind of what I wanted to have happen for the day.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good startup. I'm up anyway, so
Mm-hmm.
I don't recommend that to people, right? I know I don't get enough sleep, but
How much sleep do you get?
I probably go to bed at 10:30 at 11 o'clock.
Sweet Moses.
Yeah, so it's... I
Are you
don't
just
recommend-
accustomed to it?
Yeah, growing up on the farm, it's...
What's a fresh sleep for you?
fresh sleep.
Well, yeah, when you wake up feeling is that what it is? Do you feel rejuvenated waking up after 4 to 5 hours of sleep?
No, that's a great question. I just know I got to get up. I don't know if... I never really look at it as am I rejuvenated. It's like that pattern.
It's just part of it.
Growing up on a farm, right?
Right.
It's like it's okay, cow's got to be milked. My mom would, when I was little, she was worried that we wouldn't grow up to be men. So she kind of adopted, my dad was in the Marines.
Oh, wow.
She kind of adopted this Marine Corps DI mentality for my brothers and I. And so she would come in, like, get up, get out of bed, get away from that bed. That's the tape that plays in my head.
Stuff happen.
Yeah, get away from that bed. There's no sitting on the edge of your bed because all you're doing is pausing for no reason. So when I wake up at 3:30, my wife will say, I spring out of bed, but it's because that's how I was woke up for 15
Well, there's a lot of great advice out there about what that does to you psychologically when you do that.
Yeah.
I can't sit here and quote all of it, but
Yeah.
Basically, they say the worst thing you can do to start your day is just to sit there and linger in the bed or hit the snooze or that sort of thing. They say that literally the best thing you can do is pop up, open those eyes, and get moving.
Yeah.
So you were forced into that, whether you liked it or not, but it served to benefit you, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's you don't realize it at the time,
Right.
right? But it's just woven
That's
in
just
your
life.
DNA.
Yeah. That's awesome. Does everyone else in your household, or do they subscribe to that?
They do not. My wife, my daughter. To me, there's no better enjoyment for me at watching somebody, especially your kids or your family, sleep soundly.
No.
So I'm glad. I try to be quiet. Our dog gets up with me.
Mm-hmm.
We'll go out and get the paper, and I get to play with him for a little bit. That's a good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You would start today.
Yeah, but it is. I did. You take some enjoyment as a dad that
Yeah.
your family's resting easy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Are y'all a breakfast family?
No. I mean, we eat breakfast, but we don't do it together. We'll do it on the weekends. But
Yeah. Those are some of the times, the reason why I ask, I usually am the guy that's up and at 'em. Now, during the week, it's usually Leslie. There's no question. She's the early bird. Now, I get up fairly early, but she always beats me. But on the weekends, that's everybody's dead to the world. But for whatever reason, I gotta make sure I get up and do it. And there's something, some of the simple things in life I enjoy. Like waking up, I was like, oh, all right, Dad made biscuits and bacon.
awesome.
You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Little
I want to
stuff
come
like
stay
that.
overnight at your house.
That sounds good. You're invited anytime. All right, so let's go back. So getting up, working hard, that was from, since you could remember.
Yeah.
So how did that, tell me about the transition from, farm boy, if you will, to professionalism. Where did you move from, moving into college and that sort of thing? Give us a little bit of that transition.
So because I was out of a military family, I went to the Naval Academy, but I found out that I had a romanticized view of the military.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I went there, they very quickly, naively, I thought it would be the military or college with the military thrown in. It's not. And that's just naivete on my part. So I realized quickly what came with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I, in honest retrospect, and my dad had PTSD. We didn't know what that was then, but they quickly inculcate you to what you're there to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that was not me. And that was a hard realization when I was 18, because that's kind of what I had scaled myself to do. And I thought, man, I screwed up. I can't believe I messed this up.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I think, I don't know who told me this, but I like the saying, you can't read the label from inside the bottle.
That's great.
And it's important to have somebody on the outside of you say, hey, that's not a failure.
Mm-hmm.
You just learned that about yourself.
Mm.
So I left there, came home to IU, and started in accounting. Again, another mistake in terms of choosing a career. And what I realized, I was adopting other people's idea of what success was. I didn't stop to say, okay, who am I, and what is going to make me happy? We were auditing Norfolk and Southern Railroad at the time, and I asked their lead sales guy I really liked, and I just asked him one day out of the blue as a college intern, would you ever give me a chance in sales? And he said, let me think about that. So he came back 3 days later, he says, I'll give you a chance, but he goes, it's a chance. And he goes, two sides of that coin. You don't do well, I got to fire you. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what launched kind of my sales career. So I changed my degree to management my last semester. So I went and graduated with an accounting degree. And I took a job with, when I graduated, I took a sales job with what was then Beatrice. And ConAgra bought them like in 8 months after I started. And I started my career in CPG and with ConAgra, and moved 6 times in 7 years and ended up in Northwest Arkansas. Favorite place I've lived, yeah.
That's awesome.
So
About what time was this?
Let's see. We moved to Arkansas in 96, and then we moved to Dallas from 01 to 03, and I've been back ever since.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, so we're actually been here about the same time frame.
Yeah.
It's amazing how this area has just become what it's become. You know, at the time when I moved here, I remember people saying, because I came here in 02, and I remember people saying, oh, you just wouldn't believe how much this place has grown if they had any idea.
Right? I know. It's it's such a cool ecosystem. But people like yourself, I mean, I think of the people that I've got to meet. What I like about it is, you know, if you're in this ecosystem, if you're a shyster, you're going to be found out.
100%.
Yeah.
It's still a small community.
Yeah. And I like that. Some people say, oh, I don't like that. I said, actually, I like it because
accountability.
It's self-policing, and I get to meet folks like you. I don't think there's another place like that. I've lived in Detroit, Minneapolis, Southern Cal, Dallas, of course, Indiana. And I've not experienced another ecosystem like this in all those places. So it's unique. It's good. I used to say it was the best kept secret.
Not a secret anymore.
Not a secret anymore. Yeah.
I used to tell people the same thing. You just didn't realize. You know, I've said this. Now, you are talking to a guy I haven't been around the block as most, you know, like when I was younger. You got to understand, you know, come from a, you know, middle-class family, Southern Arkansas. A big trip for my family, mainly because a lot of my family's hermits, was coming up here and going to Branson. That was like a big deal, you know. And it wasn't until I got older that I, you know, saw different parts of the country. And you go to these places that people say, oh, man, it's so great. I love it there. Oh, it's just so wonderful. And you go there and it's like, yeah, this is good, but it's not as good. And I know a lot of people are you know, partial. They say, well, you know, there's no place like home. Well, as far as Northwest Arkansas, there really is no place like home when you're talking about Northwest Arkansas. I mean, where in the world can you find some of the world's largest corporations mixed in with hometown vibes, with wonderful parks and, you know, trails, and, you know, you're not far from, you know, the Buffalo River, and all these things combined together. And, you know, there's no question why the word's out finally. Yeah. And there's been a lot of people that used to rag on Arkansas, which I tell everybody all the time, this isn't Arkansas. This is like its own little island.
It is.
But, you know, I remember people would fly in to come see us or talk to us, and if this first time I'd be here, they'd want to make fun of, X and A. They don't. What are we flying into?
Yeah.
But then give them a few days, and there's a reason why Hollywood loves to come and make movies here now. Why celebrities are doing TikToks at the Bentonville Square. It's a great place, and we're blessed to be here. And I tell everybody too, as far as the economy is concerned, when all these other economies, when they're doing this, Northwest Arkansas is just, I tell everybody we have to be really worried if we start really getting shaky, because that means that everybody's in trouble.
It is.
Now, we're fortunate. It's a great place to do business. It's a great place to be entertained, raise a family, you name it. We got it.
Yeah.
Let's just hope it stays that way.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So getting back to you, Rich. All right. So tell me a little bit. You kind of breezed past it, but give me a little insight. If you could summarize your work history in sales, give me your first thoughts on your career path and maybe some of the challenges that you had to overcome. One thing we try to do here on this podcast, or at least I hope, is I want people, especially guys that are younger in their careers, to understand, they're not always, because we always look at stuff selfishly, like, I'm the only one that's going through this, or you know what I mean, the pity party.
Agree.
Yeah.
I
I want people to understand, that we've been there in a lot of things. So can you elaborate on that? I know it's very open-ended, but what pops in your mind?
So I think I'm going to frame this up as advice I would give younger people starting their career, and then I'll sprinkle in some of the examples that I have. That's cool.
That's wonderful.
I tell young people to get their own definition of success. You don't want to wake up and realize that you've lived somebody else's life. Mm-hmm. And that's difficult. If you have a strong family, people have expectations. Mm-hmm. At some point, you've got to say, it's up to me. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you do that, I think the quicker you'll be authentic to yourself. So I think that's one piece. And then I always say identity's 3 questions, right? Who am I? What's the situation I'm in? And what does a person like me do in this situation? Mm. So I can create that identity. And so when you're challenged with something that's going to challenge your values or whatever, I can always come back to those 3 questions. Who am I? If I say, you look at the big mistakes people have made. And I'm not picking anybody politically, but Bill Clinton, what he did with that intern. Mm-hmm. If he'd said, my identity is I'm president of the United States and I've taken an oath, he wouldn't have done that. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't have been in that trouble. David Petraeus, right? Mm-hmm. He took a fidelity oath. Mm-hmm. If you come back to that identity, then I don't get lost when something weird is presented to me. Mm. So I think that's important. And then growing up on a farm, there's an innate idea of service to others. Mm-hmm. And that you got to work as a team when you're working on a farm, and there's some stuff that's built in there. So throughout my career, I think you're given the opportunity to lead if you have kind of those 3 characteristics. If you view everything you're going to teach somebody as service to them, that's the giving piece. But having the character so people understand who you are and you're authentic to it. I can't say I'm this person and then act differently. Mm-hmm. So I feel for young people, what I teach at the Walton College of Business is they're bombarded with so much stuff. Mm-hmm. What do they separate to be important? I think social media has impacted them a lot, the whole fear of missing out. Everybody has that, but young people, it's amplified. And to the extent that they get away from that and actually develop who they are, mm-hmm. so they know how they're going to answer those simple questions when life hits them. Mm-hmm. So for my career, early in my career, I wanted to rise as fast as I could in a Fortune 500 company. And this is before I figured out who I was. So I was on the farm, you work 100 hours a week. Mm-hmm. I was accustomed to that. If you devote yourself to 100 hours a week, I know you do, mm-hmm. you're going to succeed at some level. So I was promoted quickly. We had my first daughter. What my wife and I recognized is I was making my daughter a corporate orphan because I traveled all the time. So we Thankfully, I married well. And she wasn't tied to a paycheck. We made decisions to, so I wasn't working 100 hours a week and traveling. This is creepy. You look back at your like Marriott points or, 7 million miles on American Airlines. That's not a badge of honor. I've stayed 9 years in a Marriott. 9 years have been spent in a Marriott. Well, that comes at a price.
Yeah.
And it's your family, it's your kids. So work-life balance. I say there is none. There are choices. Recognize the choices, the trade-offs you're making, and are you willing to pay that price? It just kind of happened to me. If I were to rewind the tape, I would say be intentional about that. You don't want to wake up and go, I've spent 9 years in a Marriott. And my kids, when we go on vacation, they get to stay at nice places, but if you ask them, they'd say, Dad, I would have rather had you there. So it's, people make choices that they don't realize is a choice. Because if you work for companies, you work for yourself, you can put whatever you want in that day. And early career mistake, I wasn't as intentional about it. I had to have that wake-up call. So a lot of those things, though, you'll be rewarded for them. So it's tough to say, maybe I don't want that promotion because it's going to take me away from my kids. And that's where I think it comes back to your identity.
Jumping in there, and sorry to interrupt, because you hit a nerve there. It's funny, I literally just had this discussion with a colleague of mine yesterday on this. I had kids young while I was trying to do all these things. And, my son is 18, my daughter's about to be 15. Their years of reliance on me, other than the occasional pep talk or financial, are gone.
Yeah.
And, I will tell you, I was built that way. I was built, let's get this done, bigger, better, efficiency, faster, build the empire, right? And I don't say I come from nothing. I don't come from squander, but, lower middle class family somewhere along there. And there's nothing wrong with it. I wouldn't take it back. I loved my life. But when I got up here, I saw opportunity. And, you want things. And you start putting your vision on all the things that you desire out of life for you and your family. But I will tell you, if you're not careful, one of the mistakes that you'll make is saying, well, this is for everybody. I'm doing this for everybody. And, I had trying to stay on topic, but I had a mentor tell me one time, he said, same story, trying to do, create a life, do all these things. He's like, he said, Matt, I had the house, I had the cars, I had, a boat and all these things. And my wife finally comes to me and said, what more do you need before you get in, you dedicate more of yourself to your family? And he said that hit like a sharp knife in the heart. And I will tell you, it takes a lot to, if anything, whether you're working for yourself or you're trying to climb that corporate ladder, it just takes so much. And you are correct, there are choices, but you can fool yourself as to what those choices are. And that's where there are times that in trying to build Design Steins, me and, my business partner at the time, when we first started, it was just everything you could, scratching, clawing to make it happen. But while that was happening, there was a definite imbalance.
Yeah.
And I tell the young guys now, and it's weird for me to say that, but I tell the young guys now, people that ask me my advice, I was like, look, man, absorb as much as you can, because you always think that there is another day, there's another time, there's another hour, but when you're but a vapor, and it goes like that.
Yeah.
And I have some regrets. I'll be the first to tell people I love the position of what we've done, and all the work hard. I don't disrespect that, but it did come at a price.
It does.
And enjoy more of that time. Take more of that time. You don't realize it, but it's so quick.
It's hard to, until you're living it. I don't know why it's hard to be able to do that, because I had people tell me that in the moment. Mm-hmm. And I remember telling myself,
me too.
But I'm not going to get the next rung on the ladder or what it is if I don't do this. Mm-hmm. And I think the other misnomer is you live in the future. Mm. It is so hard, and you're rewarded for it. Because especially in your business, anybody in CPG, you're successful if you live in the future. If I can predict a year out and I got to build to that, and then there's the next. Mm-hmm. And it creeps into your family life. Mm-hmm. And it's, I don't know how to get people to recognize in the moment, hey, don't make this mistake that I did. But you were financially rewarded for it. Mm-hmm. So it's a difficult dichotomy. I don't have the answer to that. I talk about it.
Yeah, I do too, but I still see it going on. And your tunnel vision is on, which you have to remember too, at least in my in my position, especially early on, you want that stability, you want that lifestyle, or you want all of these things, mm-hmm. and that's your focus. And again, you say to yourself, this is for everybody. But if everybody had their choice, kind of like what you said, they would prefer it a little more of you and a little less of that.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the balance is.
Yeah.
But, all we can do is keep on, keep telling people that's about it, and hope that it takes. I think sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't, and you get an ambitious person on the trail of something. Mm-hmm. It's hard to knock them off of it. So I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is.
You have great kids, by the way. I had the pleasure of meeting them at your open house, and that doesn't just come by accident. So you're doing something right. It's
God. I give honor and glory to God. It ain't me. Trust me.
Well,
I fall short on a lot of things.
Same here. People say, "Hey, I'm having a baby." I'm like, "You're not having a baby. You're having a person."
Yeah.
And they're going to be with you for a long time.
Man.
So
and I appreciate the compliment too.
Oh yeah,
thank you.
No, you got a wonderful family. It's encouraging me when you exposed us to that. It was nice that you had your family there, and I walk away. I'm like, wow, what a nice family. Like
I'm blessed.
Yeah,
I'm very blessed.
You are.
I am very blessed. I recognize it. Trust me. I don't know what I did to deserve it, but I'm not going to push back against it. Yeah.
No, good stuff. I don't know if I answered your question, my friend.
No, absolutely. That's it. I mean, that's what these conversations are. I like trailing off into, these thoughts that we have regarding our careers and lives, because normally you're beating me to the punch, because normally I get a little bit of the credentials and then we get off into work and then family, but it's also interconnected. Mm-hmm. And it's also very important. That's the toughest spot to be in, is you don't want to go neglect anything.
Yeah.
But, do you ever find yourself, or at least in your career, did you ever find yourself struggling with that? You made a point to, and I'll add this to it as well. When I say struggling with it, do you ever find yourself struggling with that balancing act? Did you ever do or continue to do? And then the other one too is, what did you do to counteract that? I mean, you know what I mean? Did you actually take your own head advice and I need to slow down, or did you, tell me about that?
It's, so I think we were all fed the misnomer that there's work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Companies tell you we have work-life balance, but the people who get ahead don't really have work-life balance. So I arrived at the idea that there's work-life choices. 7 years into my career, when I realized I was traveling too much, my wife and I sat down. It was a lie that was sold to me, that there's work-life balance. So I try to tell young people, I was sold this lie, you are too. And so I do this exercise in class where I call it the 4 burners of life. You have work, family, health, and friends. Mm-hmm. And then I say, now during finals week, what of those 4 do you cut out? Mm-hmm. And everybody quickly, realized, well, we cut out friends, cut out family, my health. I stopped working out. I said, so be careful because you're going to develop that life pattern when you're in crunch time. And it's going to happen to you. You don't even realize you're doing it.
And the higher you go, the more crunch times there are.
Yeah, so you end up doing that. You're setting the pattern young in life. Figure out now what you need to say no to make sure that it's really kind of those 4 quadrants for me when I look back on it. So I try to share that. And I would like to tell you I'm doing a better job of it. I guess the real test would be ask my family. But I'm more intentional about spending time with my wife. I do say no to, it's hard to say no when you're building your career, so to speak, to not go out with a group of people at work. Or you have clients in town. I respect it. I think you did this with me one time. Somebody says, you know what, I need to spend time with my family tonight. That's great. I'll go eat by myself. I wish I heard that more from folks. But we have a board of directors. They come into town, and we're with them. We're getting to build that relationship. But I'm more intentional to say no. I'm not going to go out with the group to Top Golf or whatever it is, because your kids grow up and you're just like, wow. So the impact of my dad dying when he did, I know what it's like to grow up without your real dad. A lot of people step in. It's nice, but it's different. And then I sit there and think, man, corporately, I could have done this to my kids. And I think a lot of people, when you interview somebody in college, nobody says, well, I'm going to sell out. I'm going to ride over the waterfall, right? Nobody would take that path, but they do it. Yeah. Inadvertently. And when I hear people, I'll have guest speakers come in and, say, how many hours a week do you work? No, like 80, 90 hours a week. And kids are like, I don't know, I want to work 40 hours a week. Okay. But if you want this is the amount of effort you need to do. It's rare that you can, become a company officer or send an organization, build a business, working 40 hours a week. It's just...
it's almost impossible.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. So I think, if you take your kids along, my sense is your kids appreciate your hard work. They can appreciate your hard work, but it's, I also, the flip side is I don't want it to appear so daunting that they're crushed under it. And, so I think the important thing is to talk about it. Say, I liked what you said, I'm doing this for everybody. I try to be intentional about discussing that as a family. Like, I have to do this now, so this. There is something about delaying gratification that is good.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's a part of life, right? So it's...
and our society does not like that right now.
Yeah.
It's I'd like to talk about that in a second.
Yeah. But that's... so another thing I always tell kids is, they think it's the worst time to graduate. I always wonder, what would it have been like to graduate in 1861, right? 1941.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1967.
Yeah.
Those are bad times to graduate. Yeah. There's things that are rough that, I'm not belittling it, but I don't know what it would have been like graduating in 1861. I don't even know if things can last. What do you... So I like talking to...
I love that perspective. Yeah. It's keeping yourself on the level. We always think that we're in the worst of times, but it's good to step back and say, well...
Yeah. There's the number one class at Harvard is on happiness, same as Yale.
Really?
Yeah, 1,500 kids try to sign up for it. They got to use their credits to get it. And the central question that they answer is, it's the questions you ask yourself that are going to determine that. So the example that I like, it's taught by a little Israeli guy, Tal Ben Shahar. And he'll say, when you walk in at night and your brow's furrowed, your wife says, what's wrong? All your mind goes to what went wrong. We all have to-do lists. You've spent very little time saying what went right today.
Yeah.
And if you don't strike that balance, I wish I'd gotten that advice early in my career, because you get paid to solve problems.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
And then, so you think about problems all day long, and it's easy to put people in a problem matrix. And to keep your sanity, man, I got to think of good stuff.
Count your blessings.
Yeah. And it's, people with terminal illness, my daughter goes to the Mayo Clinic. One of the things that they ask, at the end of the day, 5 things that you're grateful for, because gratitude is tied to, you got to come up with 5 different ones every day. And it's hard. You got to think about it. It's like, like this, I'm going to be grateful that you and I sat down, because there's value in this exchange. But to do that daily it takes energy, and people kind of blow it off. But man, it's a great sanity check, right? It's
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sharpening each other's iron.
Yeah.
Talking it through, having wise counsel. And I'll say I really appreciate you being here, because I always value our conversations, and I think you bring a lot of wise counsel. And so I'd like to talk about this, because it popped in my head a couple of times in this conversation. So let's talk about the dynamics you're seeing, if you don't mind.
Sure.
At the university.
Yeah.
So how many years have you been doing this now?
I started teaching in 2007, and that was a colloquium I co-taught. And then I've been in the classroom on my own since 2012.
Okay.
I had to stop and think.
So a few years then.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to know, have you seen the dynamics of, students change over the course of these years? And the reason why I ask that is because, especially since you're saying 2007, that's kind of the dawn of the beginning of social media, and a lot of, honestly, life-changing habits, particularly with a phone. Anymore is kind of second nature to see anybody with this.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
But when you think hard about it, I don't know whether to be appreciative or sad, sometimes a little bit of both, that we have evolved in such an accessible society. So I'll say this, being a guy, for one example, being a guy that loves the history of my industry.
Yeah.
Some of the things that we can do in a couple of weeks took 6 months to achieve, 50 years ago. And that's phenomenal. Same thing with communication. You had to be by a phone, to get business done for many years. And, we've seen, I remember what, the early dawn of email. I remember that, it's this thing that's just taken for granted now. I remember how that sped up so many processes, being a younger guy, not even being professional yet. And then I remember seeing, how quickly we were able to communicate through phone. And what the difference between us and some of the people that you've taught is we see the progression.
Yeah.
We've seen things from anything from, records, 8-tracks, cassettes, CDs, MP3s, and then complete streaming. We understand that as a whole, but I've never really sat down and digested what it would be like to be, come into that era of everything's at your hands to being born into it. Rich, there are people that are born that know nothing but the accessibility that it brings.
Yeah.
So it amazes me, and I contemplate it very regularly on human habits regarding that. But since you came the reason why I say all that is since you've come into this space, right at the dawn of it, how have you seen that it's affected the students?
It's I don't want to turn this into like I'm bashing generations under.
No, it's circumstantial. That's
it
the
is.
thing. They don't understand. What you know is what you know. What you don't know is what you don't know.
It is. It's a definite shift, and I like how you framed that up. I'm nervous for the generation also, but I also believe that they'll meet the challenge in the best way they know how. But the anxiety that it's created for them, I don't I feel like they don't get as much enjoyment out of the same experiences that maybe you and I had because so much is thrown at them. Mm-hmm. And it's crippling. I see people freeze up more because of what they're worried about, how they're going to be judged for sharing an opinion.
That's not good.
Now, so in class participation, I try to eliminate that, but it's difficult because it takes time for a class to actually feel that it's real. Mm-hmm. But I see it paralyzed. And I'll tell you the other thing that hit was COVID. Mm-hmm. When everybody went online, I would tell you the last 2 semesters that I've taught, you see a shift. It's like they're trying to come out of the shell of being in just a Zoom environment. And so my heart goes out to them because I don't know what that would be like. You and I, growing up, we could read the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, whatever, kind of get a sense of what's going on. Now, there's so much information out there that's not really curated in a professional way that helps me make sense of the world. And I see that as when you talk about, you give them an ethical business question. Tell me what you would do in this situation. The tendency to freeze up, and I think it's because they can't make sense of how somebody made that decision. Mm-hmm. And so I see that, and I think we've done a horrible job in helping kids curate what's important. So one thing I always ask them is, we'll make something newsworthy. And that's a paralyzing question.
It really is.
Yeah, and I said, one perspective is, did I have to make a decision on it? So when I first started doing this, there was a news feed about Kim Kardashian and what's happened to her body over time. I'm like, why is that on a CNN news feed?
Yeah.
What?
Who cares?
Somebody made a decision that was newsworthy. Is it newsworthy to you? What does my context have to be? Or take anything, somebody gets a haircut or, somebody wore this style of clothes. Mm-hmm. Is that newsworthy?
It's a clickbait nation. That's what it is. They put content out there that they know will get those clicks, and it's money related. And I understand it, but that's part of what we're talking about. And I'm sorry I interrupted you, but that's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
that's not something that we were accustomed to for a very long time, and now that it exists, and how do they absorb that? Even today with me, I will be the first to tell you, they get me too. Yeah. On occasion, they get me too. But I'm thinking, what relevance is this to a nation? But anyways, keep going. I'm sorry.
No. So that's the thing. I'm like, I want to expose them to really be careful how much headspace this is taking for you. Mm-hmm. Figure out, do I really need to dive into that, or is it clickbait? Mm-hmm. And that's a pausing moment to be like, oh yeah, why is that important to me? Because you and I could read. I go back. In the military, you had to give the 10 most important new headlines a day.
Really?
They would ask.
That's a great habit to have.
So, I could get the Wall Street Journal. I could get the banner news organizations at the time. They would curate it for you in a way. It was like, okay, that is you're going to see that play through a cycle because it is important. Now it's, how do you make sense of the world, what's important? You really got to dig for it. Mm-hmm. It's time-consuming, and it's a skill that we don't really teach. Again, it's, to your point, it's circumstantial. It's not this generation's messed up, or where we've done it to them, or we haven't given them the tools to make sense of the world around them, what to say no to, and what do I let in. And the fear of missing out is real.
Oh, yeah.
So somebody will bring it to class and say, oh, did you see this? I'm like, no, I didn't see that. Oh, well, this, and this about it. I was like, well, why is that important? What made that important? Oh, I didn't even ask myself that question. It led the CNN newsfeed. They thought that's what I wanted. I'm like, and I'm not ripping CNN. It's, you look at any newsfeed and I'm like, who's editing the editor that says this is important? Well, I think it's turned on us now to say, okay, you look at trade publications, in your business, there's good ones that curate it, but I just, these kids, one student, I said, do you mind me looking at like what you look at on a daily basis? And they had Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm like, how do you make sense of all this? Like my head would explode. Mm-hmm. And so I feel for them from that standpoint. That's what I've seen happen over time. And I try to be intentional to say there is a choice here, but the way it's fed to them.
Well, that's the thing too. And it's a powerful enemy to combat, because that's another thing that I think of too. The play on people is so strong now because of the algorithms that are set into place in technology. Because now, honestly, it's hard to see a perspective other than what you think is yours. And once this technology picks up on it, it's all that it feeds you.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to really open your mind up to that type of perspective. And I think that there's a lack of critical thinking in our society too. And so I'm not here ragging on society. I'm just saying I wish there's things that we would improve.
Yeah.
But it's easy to fall in these patterns and just follow the line that's already moving.
Yeah. When
this stuff's in place, and I think it's very dangerous. And again, I'm the same way. I've had to really limit myself, and I have to. You see, that's the problem That's the problem with my industry is I can't just cut loose social media.
Yeah.
I have to know what's going on. So I have to understand how's TikTok working, how's Facebook working, how's Instagram working. How does YouTube work? How does Rumble work? I mean, you name it. All these things that people utilize, I have to know at least enough to be dangerous with it. But to do that, you have to be involved with it.
Yeah.
So it's such a time consumer too. So not only can you get sucked into it, and you get sucked into what it's feeding you, what it recognizes what you like, and you will continue to watch. It's also it can devalue yourself through misuse and time, because that's the one thing. No matter how rich or poor we have, we can't get more of it.
Yeah.
When you're time to punch your ticket, it's time to punch your ticket. So, it's such a, and I know guys, I ask people regularly, I say, well, how much screen time? I'm just out of curiosity, when we get in these conversations, how much screen time you're spending, you would be surprised how many people tell you they've been on social media for 4 or 5 hours. It's insane.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you can learn some things from it, but let's be honest, it's not, I don't think it's a great motivator.
Yeah.
I'll put it that way.
Right.
And maybe that's just me being biased or not seeing things for what they are. I'm not claiming to know anything in this discussion, but I will say, have you seen, in your opinion, that demotivate anyone?
I think, it's interesting you use that term. I see it paralyzing people because they don't know what decision to make with it. Mm-hmm. But it ultimately could act as a demotivator, because I see people, they appear to be like they're giving up. It's like, hey, whatever. Mm-hmm. That word, whatever, I've heard it more in the last 3 years than I think in the previous 10 combined.
Really?
And and I asked a student about it, because they don't throw their hands up. They say, hey, whatever. That's a sad statement. Right? Mm-hmm. It's
just take me where the wind blows. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to overthink this, and so I always try to say, okay, am I overthinking this? But there's probably a balance there. But so it's funny what you said, that you've got to be aware of it. I rely on folks like you, so I can think about something else, because I want that expertise. I know you're going to have a piece of it that I don't have. This is how this works. This is how it fits in. And you have to pay attention to it in advertising, right? To say, okay, what's influencing the market? And it does influence the kids.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
So, in a college institution, you're hoping that you're teaching somebody how to think. Mm-hmm. And part of that just did hijack some of the whole skimming idea. Do you really understand it? 3 questions in, can you go 3 questions deep? Mm-hmm. We were taught to go 9 questions deep, and now they just don't have time to do it. And it's So, when you talk to somebody, you have quote unquote thought leaders, they're disconnected from it. So they can actually do some deep thinking. And I think if kids got that feeling, I know when I was going through college, it wasn't how smart you were, it's how hard you worked in college. And there were moments, when you're in a library studying something, you're like, you know what, I really like this deep thinking. And I wonder how many kids actually get that feeling now in college because they're just bombarded with so much stuff. And just the rating system, how kids get rated, how they rate each other. I think it's overwhelming. My heart goes out to them. I sit there, I'm like, I don't know how you deal it. I know we're doing a poor job equipping you to that onslaught. Scott Galloway always says, he goes, it's not going to change until somebody does a perp walk. Like somebody has to step in and say, this is criminal now. And I don't know what that pendulum swing is in the balance, but I don't think there's something that you and I grew up with that is an equivalency of a time that pulled you into something.
You're connected to everything.
Yeah.
You were literally connected to almost everything if you want to be.
Yeah. When I was coming of age, so to speak, everybody was concerned about MTV. And now it's laughable, right? Like, you think you have all this stuff everywhere. People, nobody's going to watch a movie on a 2-inch screen. That's insane. Fly on a plane now. And,
Yeah,
I remember in 2007, texting had just come out, and we didn't really have, like, the Blackberries and stuff, but a lot of kids just had a flip phone, and they were like, the 3 letters on each letter. I was like, why don't you just pick up the phone and call?
Yes, it seemed like a lot of work. I remember saying that. I was like, but I knew people that could do it without looking.
Yes.
And that's usually what people don't understand is, you had, the 9 keys to get it done, and they could do it without watching. I'm like, it would be so much easier if you just called.
Yeah.
We could talk. We could talk for hours on this subject. 2 questions popped up that I want to know. One, in regards to your influence on these human beings, Rich, what is your hope if they could all in unison say one thing about the influence you've had on their life? What would that be?
That I made them think differently. I would add to that somebody cared about how they experienced things. I teach from the perspective that when I was sitting in their shoes, what did I wish I knew that wasn't in the books? And I don't know what your experience was in college, but I liked my professors, but the people that had the biggest impact on me were the adjuncts that actually worked in the industry. They could say, this is really how this is applied. And going through being an accounting major, I remember thinking accounting is a science. When I took my first job at Ernst & Winnie, I remember the lead auditor saying, hey, dude, they give us the number, and we got to figure a different way to get to it. And that just gutted me, thinking this is how this really works. And I wish somebody had told me that. So what I try to do is expose them to what are the misnomers that the bridge between what you're getting in the books versus how industry really works. And these are the choices you're going to have to make. That's more than one thing, but I would tell you, like, I guess a sense of reality, the business reality that they're going to walk into is what I hope I give them in an adjunct setting. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Second question. You talked a second ago about deep thinking. So if you can and you want to, none of these questions you have to answer.
Sure.
Let me be clear, Rich.
Yeah.
How does Rich set aside the time and focus, and how do you focus to get into that deep critical thinking? What can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it's usually early morning is when I do it, when there's no other distractions. And that's usually when I have my epiphany about something I'm working on at work, or when you mentioned critical thinking earlier, like if we're presented with, I'm trying to think of an example, Matt, that work-life balance. I didn't come to that as a work-life choice immediately, but it was an early morning. I'm like, this is a misnomer. So that deep thinking was, this is what everybody says, but I don't see it being accurate. So what is it? And I said, well, it's a work-life choice. I've been sold the wrong thing. I've been told I can balance it. And there's no balance. I sat there 168 hours a week, and I'm working 100 hours, and I'm sleeping this, and there's no balance, right? Because it should be equal. So why are people telling me that? And that's how I started to think. So there's things like that in our industry. You look at it, I was like, is that really what that is? Because somebody else has labeled it. I need to think about it. So when somebody says, and I know people tell you this, they like how you think. It's because you and I have that time to say, you know what? I know we've been fed that, but that's not what's happening. And then so I could explain it. When I was younger, my mom always set up with 9 kids. She would create debates at the dinner table.
Wow, that's awesome.
And so when I was in 3rd grade, when Nixon was impeached, and my mom made me debate with my older siblings what that event meant as a 3rd grader. That's insane to me.
That is insane.
And then my older brothers are like, the quality of your thinking just isn't there. And it was that. It's not sibling rivalry, but it was, it was all meant and good. But I remember as a 3rd grader being upset that I didn't defend that position well. So my wife hates it. When my family would get together, my wife hated it because it was always an argument. But that's what I swear my mom did it. She had to entertain 9 kids. Like, what do you do? So I think of it in those terms. But what I like too, like when I come across you, somebody's thought about something and it's a truly better idea, I instantly like that person because they elevated my thinking. It's like, so I'm always impressed with people who can prepare the case. They expose me to a higher level of thinking. And I'm like, okay, I just learned something from you. I think that's the essence of it.
It's awesome. So let me ask you this. Let me continue this. So getting personal here. So there's always an argument. Is it a civil argument?
Yeah.
And everybody can just work through it for the most part? Yeah,
it's not always that way. My brothers were, I say it's normal, but if I lost an argument or whatever, they'd like, hey, let me toss it here because I want to see what a loser feels like. That what I would call that's brotherly stuff, right? Yeah.
And it's friend stuff too.
Yeah.
It's friend stuff too. Trust me, I have plenty of those.
Yeah. So it would be civilized, but we knew how to inflame a situation. And then you look at mentors. Police officers, when my dad died, they kind of stepped in and were surrogate fathers. So I got exposed to watching how they would interrogate people. And I would go to court with them, and I'd see a prosecuting attorney work a jury.
Wow.
And, it was...
that's intense and very educating.
Yeah, it was to watch how they inflame a situation, the vocabulary that they use, and so over time, but it's not... You don't ever really win an argument. So, I've played with how do you state a case so that somebody can make a decision instead of proving why you're wrong. And that took me a little ways to develop, but all of those life experiences, that's why I think, coaching is important. Like you have an executive coach so they can say, hey, shape it this way. Because we're all victims of our, upbringing. It's like, oh, well, this worked in this context. It's not going to work in this context.
That's true. So very true.
Yeah.
So let's expand on that one with that and a couple of things you said a second ago. Let's talk mentors.
Yeah.
So tell me about some of your best mentors over the years and how they shaped you and advice they given you, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Early mentors were state troopers where I grew up in Indiana. I'd get to ride with them, and they would show me how somebody lies or deception. They would tell you that a lie detector's there's no such thing. It detects deception. You have to dig into why it's deception, why they're being deceptive. And then early in my career, when I made mistakes, I had good mentors that would be like, okay, this isn't the end of the world.
Did you always realize they were mentors?
Yeah, I would look for people smarter than me. Definitely.
See, I wish I would have learned that a lot younger on.
Yeah.
I'm the guy that tells everybody, like, keep your ears open and your eyes peeled and say as little as possible, because there's guys out there that are mentoring you and you just don't realize it. I'm guilty of that.
Yeah.
I'm guilty of not realizing what people were trying to show me and do for me. And that's one of my business regrets, is not seeing that for what it is. But please continue.
No, that's so I was intentional about asking. I think part of it is like losing your dad at a young age. I always looked to older men to be like, okay, they've got this figured out. And so I would intentionally spend time with them, ask them for their time. Bob Connolly at Walmart, he and I were on the board at the CRE, and I've really liked how he thought. And so I was intentional about reaching out to him. Dave Cole, a guy that I worked with at ConAgra, at some level, there's so many, Matt, I would throw you in there. There's always bits and pieces. I say I'm a thief in the night, right? It's like, oh, I like that about that person. I want to, my wife would say, be careful, you're turning it into an interrogation. But I genuinely want to understand how they assemble their lives. Reading biographies.
I love biographies, by the way. I absolutely do.
That's a mentor to me. I always was interested in how people assembled their lives. You look at the challenges that they had, and you're like, well, how did they? I love looking at their dialogue when they're faced with a difficult situation. What was the dialogue that they? Some of it, it's a retelling of history. I like to get it raw. Like, what were you doing in that moment that, like, really what went through your mind as you made that decision? There's a book, I can't think of the name of it now. I was exposed to it by somebody. It was a diary a lawyer kept during the Depression. And it's interesting because when you read his inputs, what happened on his street, and just reading it's raw and it's real.
That's awesome.
Like people losing their houses and stuff, and he captures what they went through. I think that's the granularity that life happens at is. So it's entrepreneurs like yourself. You see you surround yourself with good people, and the level of thinking that you get, and there's an energy in that.
Absolutely.
Right? So that's what I say when I'm around people that are bright and I draw energy. I love it being around kids in school because they have all this energy. They just don't know how to channel it yet. We're all that way.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So you get energy from people.
100%. Yeah. It's what I live on, honestly.
It is.
It truly is. It's sharing that and trying to lift people up. And, it's that old saying, rising tide lifts all boats. It applies in just about every area of life, including that.
As you've gotten older, when I encounter somebody that doesn't do that, it is a drain to me.
100%.
Yeah. And one of the concepts I talk about in class is, firing a friend. Because I kept way too many people like that in my life.
Me too.
Too long.
For a long time. Yep.
And now I don't say this is a badge of honor because you want to be kind to all people, but when I encounter that, I eliminate them out of my life.
100%. Gone.
Yeah.
They're not serving anyone. And you'll find that, so I'm trying not to get on my soapbox on this one, but I will say this. One of the best decisions that I ever made in my life, and I do tell people this, is to tighten that circle and get rid of poisons. And here's what happens. I call it, for a lack of better analogy, I refer to it as poisoning the well. So here's the reality is we all, whoever you're connected to, we're all like a well. We drink from each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got somebody that's putting a little bit of poison in that well, everybody that's important to you is drinking from that as well. So what they do is, for instance, if you've got somebody, I used to have a friend, word used to,
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself, taking a deep, hard look at our friendship.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been around the guy for a long time. An okay guy, he's what I call a friend that you can have a beer with. But other than that, there's not much use to him.
Yeah.
And I found that when I was around him, I would go from up here to down here. I'd also find that it was a lot of a take relationship. He always seemed to be doing a lot more taking than he was giving. There's not a two-way street. And I stopped and I asked myself, why are you doing this? For the sake of saying that, you're a loyal friend, or the sake of, you know what I mean? It just didn't. And I know it seems, we sit here and talk about this stuff and it seems so obvious, but yet we allow it to happen. And so he was the first of many friends and or acquaintances that I said to myself, wait a minute. Now I'm going to say this. I like to try to assume good intent. It's very hard for me, being born and raised into a family of Southern Arkansas pessimists, how they going to get you kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have to watch my thinking, but I have to assume good intent. But if they continually prove themselves to be somebody that doesn't see it as a two-way street and somebody that's always bringing you down, get rid of them.
Yeah.
Done, out. And the same thing I'll speak culturally, too. It's what we call, at the Einsteins, we have quarks and quarkisms. And the quarkisms are how indicators of the actual quarks. And one of our quarkisms is number 6, don't let snakes in the barn. Now, that came from a well-named person around here that people think a lot of in a business, and it was one of these businesses that had just a legacy to it, but it took a nosedive.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him point blank, dude, what happened?
Yeah.
He simply said, Matt, you let snakes in the barn.
Yeah.
And it's easy as that. If you let somebody that's not there to try to be a friend, that's not trying to uplift you, that's not trying to make you a better person, well, I've come to you just need to get rid of them. I've come to the conclusion that people either pushing you up or pulling you down. There's really very little middle ground, with the exception of kids, because your kids, you're supposed to be getting them on the right trajectory. But as grown adults, you're either pushing somebody up or you're pulling them down. That's the way I view it. For whether I'm wrong or not, that's how I
love that analogy. I think, don't you wish you had learned that in your 20s?
If I, that's one of my regrets.
Yeah.
If only I had known. Only I had known. But that's why hindsight's always 20/20.
You mentioned loyalty, because I think that's where a young person, you feel like it's a misplaced loyalty. You give loyalty way too fast. And I say I was fortunate because I moved around a lot early in my career, so I could jettison some of those, before Facebook, all that. I could jettison those relationships because I was no longer physically in there. So that's one of the things I ask the kids in class, really look at your circle of friends and say, who should I fire? Because my mom would say that, but like when I was in high school and I didn't pay attention to her, she'd be like, that kid's not getting you to the end zone. And she was right. But as a ignorant young person, I would be like, oh, you don't understand Stan. He's a good guy. He does this.
Different.
Yeah. And she would, you're ignoring all that experience to be like, no, that kid's a problem. He's and he's in jail. Yeah, you're right. Like, For whatever reason, the pride at the moment when you're young and stupid is you like, I don't know, I didn't want my mom to be right in those moments. And if I could dial back the clock, I don't know what pill you take that gets you I should actually listen to the oldest person in the room at some level, right?
Mm-hmm. You're naive.
Yeah.
And you think you know more than what you do. It's as old as time. One of the best things that served me, though, and I've been blessed, and it wasn't by intention. It really wasn't. It's just, I call it a God thing. I am fortunate that a lot of my, not only my mentors are, several years older than me, but even my friends. I don't know how this happened, but most of my closest friends are about 10 years older than me. That has served me well. One of the worst things I think you can do is ask, and this is just my opinion, I don't want anybody, jumping on me by this, but one of the worst things you can do when it comes to business and personal life is asking somebody your age. Because they're just, more cases than none, they're just as naive as you are. And one thing that I've been blessed with is having people that are older than me. I can see the forks in the road, and I can have them tell me about them long before I get there.
Yeah.
And that is a blessing. That is an absolute blessing. But
I agree.
Well, Rich, we're about to run out of time, but I do want to end with one question.
Yeah.
What brings Rich joy?
Oh, man. Ideas, relationships, and adventure.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. It's going to be the best answer I've gotten so far.
I like this. I draw energy from this. I love being around thought leaders, relationships where I can double down on trust, everything that you think about a relationship, and then being with a group of people that can create adventure. Where I work now, Casey Roberts, I don't know if you've ever met him, but Casey took me on a great adventure in stat recovery, and those are the people that I'm always grateful for. It's, awesome. Ideas, relationships, adventure.
Okay. Well, I can't think of a better way to end the podcast. Rich, I hope you'll come on again.
Yeah, thank you. This has been awesome.
And thank you for coming. I appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you, my friend. Absolutely.